Journal is an on-the-air magazine reporting on the personalities, ideas, and issues that affect Black America. It attempts to achieve balance by reporting from a Black perspective.
Black Journal's 5th season is highlighted in this new Black Journal magazine, featuring such articles as A Rap with Melvin Van Peebles, the phenomenal growth of Friends of Black Journal chapters, and a black paper on white racism. For your free souvenir copy, send your name and address and 50 cents in postage stamps. Do not send cash or checks. To Black Journal, Department M, 10 Columbus Circle, New York. Black Journal, 10 Columbus Circle, New York.
It has an enormous impact upon the life of black people.
The Board of Education is appointed by the mayor, and the mayor runs it.
Chicago's fortunate in that when compared with other major cities, it has provided more opportunity for blacks than perhaps any other major city in the country.
Although a black explorer, Jean-Baptiste du Sablé was Chicago's first settler in 1765. It wasn't until the early 1900s that a sizable black population was established in Chicago. It was composed of Southern migrants who had been lured north by the promise of jobs at good wages, but who found out upon arrival that the only way to make a living in this industrial city was as a maid, janitor, or bootblack. Now, in the last part of the 20th century, Chicago blacks want a bigger piece of the pie. By 1975, the U.S. Census Bureau predicts that 50% of the population will be black. The famous Democratic machine of Cook County is just beginning to feel the political stirrings of the dissatisfied. But some observers feel that it will take more than a change in politics to bring economic and political viability to Chicago's blacks.
This is Chicago, the Windy City, gem of the Midwest and probably the most racially segregated of the major cities in the United States. In 1833, when the town was incorporated as a village, there were only 200 inhabitants. Today, there are 3.5 million Chicagoans and 150,000 businesses in the metropolitan area. But this too is Chicago, and it has a different story to tell. This is where most of the city's 1 million blacks live. Their homes a far cry from the fancy steel and glass high-rise structures that are becoming the new promised land for the whites and the wealthy.
How does local government affect housing for black people in Chicago?
I couldn't talk about local government without talking about the federal government, in that the federal programs, umbrella, whatever the local programs are. I mean, I'm speaking specifically of HUD and its subsidiary FHA.
Has urban renewal been a positive or negative aspect?
In my opinion, it's been a negative aspect in that so many blacks were displaced, and of course, in turn, created high density and more congested conditions in the areas that surrounded the urban renewal programs. There are many urban renewal programs that were started, say, 10 years ago, where the land is still vacant and people are still unhoused. HUD is saying that you can't have a house in the city and white folks ain't gonna have you in the suburbs. So, you know, it seems to me that, you know, blacks have to become moon folk in order to do anything. And this is what we're gonna have to work with. This is what we're gonna have to deal with.
I think it ought to be said, however, that urban renewal, contrary to popular belief, is not simply a housing program. It is a process for renewing communities and providing not only added housing, but other amenities, so that it may well be true that urban renewal has destroyed more housing than it has built. But I think that the effectiveness or ineffectiveness of the urban renewal program has got to be dealt with in terms of the overall effect it's had on the community. I think that in 5 years, Chicago will be regarded by black people all over the country as one of the best big cities in the country to live in.
The great white father has plans for recapturing Chicago. This year, we have some $3.5 billion worth of housing under construction. I'm speaking of commercial, industrial, office buildings, hotels. You know, in the circle, Chicago, downtown, and its periphery. Okay, now, with that in mind, nobody can tell me that the man has any ideas about abandoning Chicago, but he has some ideas about getting you out. And I see the site selection criteria as a plan to not move black people to the suburbs, but move them to exurbia, you see. I mean, that's beyond.
As in other black communities in major cities, the drug problem in Chicago is a constant source of concern for its citizens.
It's just a drug problem. Okay, it's a drug problem. Everybody's out to, you know, to get you and things like that.
Drugs are available for anybody who wants it.
You could smell pot. You could see people dropping off sacks of heroin and stuff, and people have been killed in the building.
What would you say is the percentage of black people that are drug addicts versus the total population in Chicago?
There is no answer that you could say it's this figure, it's that figure. They identified maybe 18,000 addicts in Illinois. If we look at it percentage-wise, we say comfortably between 60 and 70% of that number would be black people. A larger number of black veterans and black people, period, are showing up for treatment. And that is part of the fact. Now, the population, the total addict population has never been identified, but we'd say 60% of those people in treatment, and even higher, are black people, because it's an urban problem, and it's a ghetto problem, it's an inner cities problem, and it's a black folks problem.
The Kumba Workshop dramatizes one aspect of the drug syndrome. A mother mourns for her son who has returned from Vietnam, a drug addict. She helplessly watches as he steals from her to pay the pusher for his last fix.
One day, take some money from my purse, and that's when I knew that boss had gotten worse. To protect his country, well, I think that's a hell of a price to pay. And you let his real enemy, you let the pusher get away. But like most brothers, I still get on my knees to pray. But my son died from an overdose last Mother's Day. Now can't you see what you done to my only son, my only son? I didn't have a one.
Provident Hospital, a black institution, has been serving its community for 82 years. It is one of the city's largest employers of blacks.
Provident Hospital was founded in 1891 by Dr. Daniel Hill Williams, a black physician who felt a need for a black facility in the city of Chicago. Dr. Daniel Hill Williams put Provident in the annals of history through performing the first open heart surgery some 2 years later in 1893. Provident was founded at a time black physicians or nurses could not go for post-training, And the concept of Providence was to be a training ground for black professionals. And the county hospital in Chicago at that time was not taking on black interns or black nurses. Yes, I think Providence, politically, historically, has been considered a black institution in Chicago. We have on our drawing boards currently a $50 million expansion plan. There's a need for a Providence. We documented the need for the facility. The powers to be recognized the need. And realistically, many of the all-white institutions don't want to carry the patient load that we are carrying.
Traditionally, Chicago has been the home for the black press. It was in this city that one of the nation's oldest black publications, the Chicago Defender, was founded in 1905. Today, the Defender is published daily and reaches approximately 200,000 people. Chicago is also the home of one of the major black organizations in the country, the Nation of Islam, and it is here that their newspaper, Muhammad Speaks, is published. It claims the largest circulation of any black newspaper in the country and influences thought disproportionate to its size among ghetto blacks. Today's multi-million-dollar business, known as Johnson Publishing Company, was started 30 years ago on a $500 loan. In addition to publishing Ebony, Jet, Tan, Black World, and Black Star, the company has also recently acquired radio station WGRT.
The Chicago Daily News is one of the 4 metropolitan daily newspapers. Lou Palmer, a reporter and columnist for the Daily News, talks about the problem of blacks in journalism.
Black communications in this city is in a bad way, both quantitatively and qualitatively. The problem is that with the exception of the black press, the communications media in Chicago, as elsewhere, is totally white-owned and white-controlled. We've got 40 to 45% black people in this town, and 2% of the reporters are black. So when you combine the total circulation of the black press, it doesn't even begin to touch the circulation of one of the metropolitan daily newspapers. So far as I'm concerned, the quality of reporting by the black reporters is excellent. The problem is, what happens to the reporting after it's done. Because after the reporter turns in his copy, it goes through a series of editors and copy readers and what, and all of them are white. Consequently, the nuances and the impressions that black reporters really want to get across very often are structured out of the story. I think the #1 issue is the American system's effort to maintain control over black people's minds. And living in Chicago, we really catch it. The one beautiful example of what may be an awakening among black people is that we just recently kicked State's Attorney Hanrahan out of office. And black people kicked him out of office. Black people got fed up, and they learned how to split their ticket, and they voted him out of office. Other than that, we've been tied to the democratic machine. I really do not see that blacks will make any serious inroads into control of the media. Black people have got to establish some alternative forms of communications. We can't deal with this traditional established communication system. No, I see little improvement in the future.
According to one of the 3 black members on Chicago's Board of Education, it took a court case in 1964 to make the board recognize that there was a problem of segregation in the Chicago public school system. At the time, a neighborhood school policy left black children to attend the inferior segregated schools, which dominated their communities. Today, nearly 10 years later, 85% of all black children in Chicago still attend schools, which are predominantly, if not all, black. In fact, 60% of Chicago public school students are black. In the fiscal year of 1973, there is a possibility that the schools will be forced to close early because of a budget deficit of over $60 million. In general, the future of the public schools in Chicago looks bleak, which has prompted some blacks to seek alternatives to the system.
Barbara Sizemore is the former director of the federally funded Woodlawn Experimental Schools Project, a program which made an effort to involve the community but was not refunded.
The main purpose was to restructure the social system through a mutuality of effort so that community, parents, teachers, administrators, and students, what we called CAPS, could work together in a decision-making board called the Woodlawn Community Board. The conflict was expected because parents and students and community had never sat on a policy-making board before, and their demands and expectations of public school education was decidedly different than those held by teachers and administrators. So conflict was anticipated. But during the time of the project, as the students became more sophisticated and gained seats on the board, they began to participate more in this decision-making. The surprise element in the project was that the teachers decided that the community should evaluate them. So when the teachers said, we want the community and the students to evaluate us, what they were really doing was saying to the community, we'll give you this power. The Board of Education rules said that the principal was to evaluate the teacher. But the Woodlawn Community Board had ordered her to do otherwise, and she did not do so. The Woodlawn organization sided with the system against the teachers and the students and said that they would support this principle. I stood with the teachers and the students on this issue because I felt that it was critical to community power. And so now I am in the Board of Education, and I don't suspect that I will ever be placed in an administrative position in the field at that level again.
Would you say you're on
Barbara Sizemore believes she is being punished because of her involvement with the community.
The Board of Education is appointed by the mayor, and the mayor runs it.
Mayor Daley has been the mayor since, I believe, 1954 or 55, and he runs a pretty tight ship. That includes the educational program as well. Even though theoretically the Board of Education is independent of the city administration, not very many things of any great importance are done in the city without the approval, or tacitly or otherwise, of the city administration. The program is going down while salaries and costs are going up, and unfortunately we have perhaps one of the lowest reading scores and arithmetic scores of any big city around the country.
The 1971 citywide testing scores for 8th graders showed a 6.7 median score in reading as compared to the national average of 8.1. In arithmetic, Chicago children scored of 6.9 compared to the national score of 8.4.
At the same time, we have one of the highest starting salary rates for teachers.
Is the board an impetus to change?
Yes, it can be if there are 6 members who are of like mind. They can direct the superintendent to do what the board wants done, or get a new superintendent. It's just as simple as that. At one time, we were on the verge of having 6 members who sort of thought the same, but at the last minute, the 6th member, who was up for reappointment, was summarily dropped by the mayor's nominating commission, and this member was not reappointed to the board. So as a result, the forces for status quo, as I like to call it, have 6 members, and the forces for change usually have 5 members or less. Until we have members on the board who are willing to innovate, who are willing to go right down the line in effecting changes that are good, particularly for black children and other minority children, I don't think we're going to get it in Chicago until the situation becomes so bad there is a crisis of just tremendous proportions.
We saw that the public school system in this city was grossly deficient and inefficient in terms of educating our children. For instance, average high school student coming out cannot read at a 6th or 7th grade level. So therefore, in order to change that direction, we decided that we need to teach our own. I think an example is, for instance, in New York City, the Jews do not send their children to the black community to be taught anything. In New Jersey, the Italians do not send their children to the black community to be taught nothing. In Chicago, the Irish don't even want their children sitting with black children. But yet and still, we expect to send our children out every place else for anybody else to teach and for them to come back and be black and be responsible and responsive to our needs. That's a contradiction. The programs which we push, which are the history of the black man, we talk about basic academic skills in terms of reading, writing, and math concepts. We talk about Swahili, geography of Africa and black nations. And we talk about nutrition and body functions. And also we teach self-reliance crafts and African song and dance.
Cause is the blackest of them all. Cause is the blackest of them all. Z. Cause is the blackest of them all. E. Cause is the blackest of them all. Kazi means work.
We have something like 150 people, students on our waiting list now. So as we enlarge, we will enlarge our program also. We have not received any outside funds whatsoever. We cannot replace the Chicago public school system. You know, we don't have the funds, we don't have the space, we don't have the people. But the point is, we can show an alternative that works, and that's what we're trying to do.
How does local government affect the judicial process in Chicago?
In Chicago, it controls it, pretty much. It's impossible for a man to aspire to a judgeship unless he has been nominated through his ward organization. He has to serve his allegiance in some kind of way, and then he finds himself on the bench as a reward for faithful service to the party. So the whole fashion means that though there is the appearance of the people selecting their judges, that isn't what happens at all. Police brutality is an issue, but more to the point is the failure for the institution of police to provide some method by which people who have complaints and grievances against the police misconduct, which they euphemistically call excessive force, but we call police brutality. The history, of course, is just very, very simply known by everybody that it's an organization in the old-fashioned style, and it's really tight, and it really works. Works for the benefit of the politicians, does not work for the benefit of the people who have to live under those politicians.
I think that in Chicago, as in most major cities, major initiative has got to come from local government. The problems of cities are so massive that without leadership being provided by local government and resources in the form of money being provided by state and federal government, they can't be attacked by the private sector alone. Now, government can't do the job alone. It takes a cooperative effort between the government and the local communities, but clearly there's got to be leadership on the part of local government.
Yet, in Chicago's black community, daily confrontations are a matter of reality.
This one night, they stopped up there, and they put these 5 brothers up against the wall just because they were standing there, you know. And so this brother, he resisted their attempt to harass him, you know. He said, I haven't got to stand up here and be intimidated and humiliated by you all when this is my equal rights just to be here, you know. And so he started walking away, and so they called him back. So, like, they were still harassing other brothers, so he had umbrella. He started swinging at him. Now they killed him, just shot him.
7 times.
7 times.
7 times.
7, all to the head.
Search for the Truth Incorporated is an investigative, community-based organization. In a city that has seen the Chicago 7 conspiracy trial, the murder of Fred Hampton, and the alleged murders by the Mau Mau, Search for the Truth members feel their organization is needed to publicize and unite their community. Last year, when the police investigation into the mysterious death of 7 black men was handled routinely, it was this organization which pushed for more serious examination of the case. Headed by Russ Meek, Search for the Truth fights for prison reforms, particularly in the area of legal aid. Meek regularly visits inmates at Pontiac Prison, where most of the population are Chicagoans. At Pontiac, the climate has been relatively progressive. On December 14th, however, several weeks after our filming, there was a riot between inmates of rival gangs. As a result, there has been a movement to remove the warden and curtail some of the progressive programs.
We're in Pontiac Prison in the state of Illinois, in the city of Pontiac, and we have with us both the warden and the assistant warden, and we also have some of the members of Discussion Unlimited who are here against their will, I might say. What is your conception of prison life?
I got 2 experiences, man, in terms of being reborn that has helped me.
prior to my coming here, I was, you know, not negative, but I was kind of vocal, kind of violent. A prison is dehumanizing.
Warden Harvey, do you agree with that?
I would say probably more so in its previous stance than it is now. We have a court system thing that worked out now where we're trying to give some people choices in these places, not just to try to use hardcore tactics. I do represent the first black person in the 100-year history of this institution.
But even with that, even with the positive programs that function in this institution, it was brought out in the McKay Commission report that the ingredients that set off Attica are existing in every institution throughout the United States.
Warden Petrilli, you sat there quietly listening, and how do you feel about what he said?
Obviously, you know, it's a kind of an unnatural setting, as most penitentiaries are. And we do have the great numbers that we have to deal with. But we're trying, like the devil, to meet needs of people. And we're trying to, it's very difficult on occasion, to try to get staff and inmates to work together in some common goal that says that we need each other for intelligent programming.
So this points out the contradiction, you know, in the system of locking men in an institution like this, in an abnormal situation. Now, even with the positive types of programs that we have, even while we're sitting here, this institution is liable to go up. And so there's something that's not being done. I think that, like, the American judicial penal complex must be totally dismantled as it exists now, because you cannot confine men in the Auburn-style setup, you know, where you stack men on top of each other and expect them to conform. You have to let them back out into communities. Now, Illinois is going in that direction, but it hasn't reached that goal yet. No. Even though we do negotiate, you know, across the table, if it ever comes to a violent sort of situation, you know, all of that breaks down and we have to revert back to our animal instincts, and you will, you know, like, order us to be killed.